My review for Impact Wrestling on Destination America. Tonight's episode of Impact Wrestling was the Lockdown 2015 edition of Impact. And I would say this was a good show from them as far as just a regular episode of Impact. It was fun from top to bottom. I liked a number of things they did on here, even though some things I would nitpick and say they should have given more time to certain matches, especially the women's match, and I probably would say the same thing for the Roode and Eric Young match. That match should have been given probably just a little more time, and some of the segments probably could have been cut. But as far as TNA on Destination America, I kind of gave my brief thoughts of Impact's move to Destination America, where I said booking wise it hasn't really changed around too much, but I gotta say they have improved the wrestling quality a tad bit. That's definitely improved since they've came to Destination America. As far as Impact, I thought last week's episode was probably the best episode that they've done since being on Destination America. That's the one episode I would say go out your way to see. Even though they only had 3 matches on there, or 3 or 4 matches on there, everything got enough time. Everything was spaced out perfectly, and they did some build up for the show that happened tonight that was fairly good. Tonight's episode, while like I said, it was good for a regular episode of Impact, considering they were trying to build this as a special event, and this is basically them saying you're getting locked down for free on Destination America. You're not having to pay for it on pay-per-view. So them kind of making a special event, it didn't really feel like a special event, even though it did have a number of good matches. So let me get into my review. Started off with the Hardys versus James Storm and Abyss for the TNA Tag Team Titles. This was a really, really good way to start the show. Good back and forth action, really good solid tag match here. And within this match, the thing that was hyped up the most was Jeff Hardy taking this, crazy dive, which Jeff Hardy taking a crazy dive or a bump is kind of pretty much to be expected in any type of cage match or hardcore match, but that was the big hyped up thing, and that happened post match. But the tag match, I thought, it was really good action, and it was booked fairly well with, at one point, you had Matt Hardy getting pulled outside the cage, so Jeff Hardy was left by himself inside the ring, and then you had the end come when before James Storm hit Jeff Hardy with the super kick, he got the mist in his eyes from the Great Sonata, and that blinded him. Then James Storm hit him with a super kick, and James Storm and Abyss retained the TNA Tag Team Titles. Really solid match. Good match to kick off the episode of Impact. And then post-match is where the craziness happened. This is where, at the beginning, it looked like the Hardys were going to have the advantage and get their revenge on the Revolution and James Storm. Then the numbers came to bite the Hardys in the ass. Then the spot that Jeff Hardy did, which this was a brutal, vicious bump that he took. Jeff Hardy was trying to get outside the cage. He was near where the cage door was. He gets crotched up there, and then James Storm hits him with a cowbell, and he takes this vicious bump to the floor where he lands on the steel steps, bumps off them, and just a vicious, vicious bump right there from Jeff Hardy. I mean, I don't know how Jeff Hardy, is able to still walk, not necessarily this bump, because I think I've seen some other crazier ones from him. But this was a vicious bump. I'm not downplaying it one bit at all. But Jeff Hardy, at this point in his career, maybe he should kind of, even though this is one of the things that people love seeing Hardy for is, his crazy high-flying shit and the crazy falls and shit that he will do. But at this point in his career, maybe he needs to tone it down just a little bit. But definitely a vicious bump there, and obviously because of the whole thing with the Revolution and James Storm standing tall after this is not the end that we'll see of the Hardys versus, Abyss and James Storm, which I have no problem with because this was a really good, solid tag match we had as opener on this show. Then after this was normally a segment, I would say, for, a big event like this where they're trying to make it seem like a big event, where I would say the next segment shouldn't have been on here. This was a segment with MVP in the ring, but I had no problem with it because MVP is awesome on the mic. I mean, he is great. I mean, that's like one of the biggest highlights of Impact Wrestling for me nowadays is MVP on the mic. He's like the one person like I would allow to talk and do a 20-minute promo, and I will love it every second. I mean, that's how great he is on the mic. And really, this segment was done because the Lethal Lockdown match more or less was thrown together at the last minute, and they had to do something to add a little heat to it, and that's what the whole segment here was. MVP talking down on the crowd, talking down on Team Angle and everyone, and to add more heat, Gunner's out here. You know, you see a big brawl with Team Angle and the Beatdown Clan, and then Gunner gets his arm into the steel into the door of the cage. They slam a chair against it, so looks like, you know, he work-wise broke his arm or he injured himself right there. And what will that have to do? And how will that affect, you know, Team Angle going into the main event? So at least this served a purpose right here, that they had to add a little something for you to be more interested in Lethal Lockdown and add a little more heat. And the whole thing of not only, you know, was Team Angle at a 3-4 disadvantage against the Beatdown Clan, but now, you know, Gunner possibly might be out. So that was a good thing they did right there. But I would say I wish they would have done it on last week's Impact instead of tonight's, because they could have, even though it was a segment that was worthy of being on here and it served a purpose, it could have been that time for that segment was given. They could have gave that probably to one or two of the matches on here, but I had no problem with it because, like I said, MVP on the mic is fucking awesome. And then the next match was the main match I was looking forward to the most of the night, and I think a lot of people would say that as well, other than the Lethal Lockdown match. This was Havok versus Awesome Kong. This is a match they've actually done a good job building up, built it up with Kong making her reappearance with TNA, coming back to TNA on their first episode back on January 7th on Destination America, with a big, you know, face stare down between Havok and Kong then. So this has been built up for a month, and considering this match kind of felt like, you know, just a little taste of what we would get, I think we're going to get much more with Havok and Kong. It was a really brutal, you know, match here, especially for a women's match that you would see in mainstream wrestling with WWE or TNA. Really good stuff, hard hitting, enjoyed it. The crowd was hot for this. The only thing I would say is I wish it would have got more than 5 or 6 minutes. But like I said, this is probably not the last we're going to see of Havok and Kong. Really, really good match. I forgot to give my rating for the first match, the tag team match. I'd probably give that, you know, 2.5 or 2 3/4 stars. This match I would give 2 stars, and I would say fun match, but should have been given more time. The women's match with Havok and Kong. Really enjoyed it. The crowd was hot for it. I liked it a lot, but I just wish it would have been given a little more time. And then the next matchup was Eric Young versus Bobby Roode. You know, these two guys have been in TNA for many years. You know, they were with Team Canada, best friends turned bitter rivals, and this was a really good match. Eric Young and Bobby Roode, I really, really enjoyed it a lot. It was kind of hurt by one thing, kind of like the Havok and Kong match. I didn't think it was given as much time as what it should have been, but for the time that Eric Young and Roode were given, it was really, really good. Very brutal. Eric Young is busted open in here. He's bleeding like a bloody mess here, and just really, really good stuff, and liked it a lot. Roode picks up the win. You know, probably easily 2 3/4 star match, maybe even a 3-star match. Really enjoyed it. Probably was my second favorite match of the night was probably Eric Young and Bobby Roode. I really, really enjoyed that match. Just wish it would have been given a little more time. And then up comes the next thing, the next match. This is something I could have dealt without, even though it did, I guess, serve some purpose of being on here, because it's not like they weren't doing anything with them. It's not like it was a thrown together match, but I think the Mandrews and Spud teaming up to take on Tyrus, I think that could have been saved for another episode of Impact. They could have easily given that time that they've gave to that match to, you know, if they would have cut that and maybe even cut the segment they did with MVP, even though I had no problem with the MVP segment. But if they would have been able to cut those two and maybe some of the backstage stuff, they probably would have been able to give some of the matches a little more time. it wasn't terrible. Tyrus versus Mandrews and Spud wasn't terrible. I was expecting a steaming pile of shit, but it wasn't that bad. It was at least watchable, and Spud's real over with the crowd, and this did have EC3 on the show, so I guess that was the main purpose of that match being on this special of TNA Lockdown, was to have Spud on here because he's very over with the crowd, and to have EC Carter the Third, and Tyrus picks up the win via help from EC3, and then post-match, Tyrus and EC3 try to shave Spud bald. Jeremy Borash saves him, stops it, cuts the cord, and this is the thing I could deal without. Like, I don't mind Spud and EC3. I think that's actually some good stuff, but we could do without Tyrus. We definitely could do without Jeremy Borash being involved in a wrestling angle. That is probably one of the things that if I want to be really go into of some of TNA's booking problems, that's one of the booking problems they shouldn't do. Jeremy Borash in the ring, and the whole thing with the Spud and EC3 angle I have no problem with, because it's working for what it is. It's getting Spud over. It's making EC Carter 3, a top heel. Well, maybe not a top heel, but at least a mid-card, upper level heel to some degree. So it's serving a purpose, but Jeremy Borash involved in it just makes it really, really bad. Like I said, the handicap match was watchable at best. I'd probably give it 1.5 stars. Definitely the worst thing in the night, but even though it was the worst thing in the night, it was at least watchable. It wasn't god-awful. I was expecting much, much worse from it. And then we have the main event of the night, which was the Lethal Lockdown match with the Beatdown Clan versus Team Angle. The first two competitors started. We have Kenny King on the Beatdown Clan side, and the first one on Team Angle was Gunner, which I think they could have done something different here. Instead of having Gunner start it, they probably should have had him second and maybe Aries start it, like switch the position they had, just because I think you would have had a better start to it, and you could have had, the whole thing of Gunner, even though he's hurt going into this, coming out there to try to save Austin Aries. I think that would have worked a little bit better, but Kenny King and Gunner had a pretty decent start to here. Once Aries came out there, it definitely picked up, and then Low Key came out there, and that was then Low Key came out there. Then it was after that it was after Aries, Low Key and Joe, and then Kurt Angle and MVP was out there, and it was looking like we weren't going to have, it was going to be 4-3. It wasn't going to be anyone else for Kurt Angle's side. The odds were against him. Then Lashley comes out there, his music hits, he walks out there looking like he's not going to get involved in it. He comes in there, at first he's acting like he's on the Beatdown Clan side, shakes the hands of MVP, so it looked like, motherfucker, Team Angle's going to get screwed here. Then obviously, obviously you knew what was going to happen here. He knocks down MVP, so he comes in there, helps Team Angle, and Team Angle ends up winning this match after all the other members other than Lashley have their opponents in submission holds, and Lashley spears MVP for the win. So the baby faces win here. This is one time that I think the heels should have won the Lethal Lockdown match, especially with the whole thing you're doing with the Beatdown Clan. I think it would have added much more for that heel stable if they would have won here, but it was a good main event. It wasn't a great Lethal Lockdown match, but for a TV match main event, it was good. I definitely enjoyed it. Yeah, I probably would say 3 stars. So as you see with my star ratings, I thought a lot of the matches were good. I just thought some things should have been given a little more time on this episode. Maybe a few things should have been cut, but I mean, other than that, it was another fun week of wrestling for Impact Wrestling on Destination America. I would say that I enjoyed last week's episode much more, because I thought the main event last week was much, much better. And not only that, you had, a women's match that was actually given some time, and you had Abyss versus Jeff Hardy in a Monsters Ball match. So I thought the episode that actually wasn't the special was actually better than the special and Lockdown, but I still thought it was a good show. I'll probably give it, 6.5, 6.75. You know, if I just give it, you know, a grade, I'd probably give it, you know, B minus probably. You know, thumbs up. It wasn't a bad show. It was fun for what it was, and I'm glad that we're seeing that. Even though there are some issues that I have with TNA's booking, I am glad that we are at least seeing a little change around in the in-ring product. We're at least seeing, you know, a better in-ring product than what we've seen before. So maybe that's one of the positives of not having to be with, you know, a corporate network like Spike TV, and this is like a lesser known network, so they have a little more leeway and they don't have to cater to, you know, their corporate masters that much. So at least, you know, we're getting a better in-ring product. I just wish some things would turn around in the booking department. But other than that, it was a fun episode. I definitely would recommend people to see it. It was a fun episode, but like I said, if you want to see a better episode of Impact, I would say watch last week's episode, even though tonight's episode did have a number of fun things on it. So that's it for my Impact Wrestling review of the TNA Lockdown 2015 edition of Impact Wrestling. And that's it. All right, peace.